What's up, guys? So 12.10 is just around the corner, and if you haven't been living under a rock, you'll know that the champion durability changes are being shipped with it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, or you need a little refresher, the patch notes are on the screen. So today, in this video, I want to first talk about my personal take on the changes and how I think this will affect the champion meta, which will then lead into my top 10 mid lane champs for the patch. As a disclaimer, I should mention that every change introduced to the game is always going to have an element of unpredictability. That said, I feel like the information that's been given to us should allow us to make an educated guess on what will be good this patch. So the first point I want to make is that assassins and early game champs who rely on snowballing will become weaker. So that's champions like Zed, Fizz, Kiana. They're going to suffer due to finding it harder to get kills in the early game. If you add that onto the fact that everyone is just going to get tankier as the game goes on, the mid to late game is going to be really hard. So I guess if you think of it like this, in the current patch, these champions need to get ahead in the early game to kind of have an impact mid to late game. And if you go to the next patch, not only is it going to be harder to get kills in the early game, now you're going to reach like mid to late game when these champions are going to be tankier than before, and you're going to have less of a gold lead than you would have last patch. So if you add those two facts together, I think these kind of champions are going to see a dip in win rate. So the second point is that slower mid laners will thrive when there isn't so much snowballing happening in the early game. So what this means is that champions who scale well with items and levels and are probably a bit weak early game, they're going to be able to reach their power spikes without the game getting out of control, right? So I don't know if you've ever been in a scenario where you're playing a farming champion and the enemy laner is just getting kills in your side lanes, he's snowballing, and suddenly, like, before you even get to impact the game on your power spike, the game's over, right? So you're going to see that happening a lot less. So what's going to happen is if someone does pick an early game champion, they're going to be on a omega clock, right? So they're going to be on a clock, they're on a timer to win the game before you as a scaling champion hit your power spike. And this can be a champion like Veigar, Azir, Vladimir, like these sort of slow champions that once they reach like 1 to 2 items, they're an absolute powerhouse. Finally, I want to talk about consistent damage versus burst damage. With everyone's effective HP going up this patch, champions are going to be less susceptible to being bursted down. So a lot of the time, you're going to need multiple rotations or short cooldowns to lethal a target. I think this is also compounded with how AP mythics are going to perform on the patch. So higher HP is a direct buff to Liandry's, and base magic resist buffs is a direct nerf to Ludens and magic pen items. So this all kind of leads to the trend that being able to consistently damage is going to be better than one comboing. So just like a random example to give is a Cassiopeia being able to land poisons on you and constantly E you over and over and over is more likely to kill you than a Zoe landing one sleep and a Q with burst items. So to start off the list at 10th place, we have Ahri. So Ahri was the queen of mid this last patch, or the current patch, and I think she'll still be pretty solid. However, with the changes, she's definitely going to be lacking damage. So Ahri in the current patch is extremely good champion, right? Like the reason why she's so good is that she has really good wave control. Her laning is really strong. She has good safety in her ult, giving you 3 dashes, and her playmaking potential is so good. So you can always like dash forward. You can chuck a charm. You can chuck an Everfrost. When you have those two items, you actually have two really powerful CC abilities. So that's kind of like why Ahri was so strong. But I'm not gonna lie, like even in her strongest form right now, Ahri still kind of has issues with damage, and that is absolutely going to be a problem next patch. So I put her at the bottom of the list because while she is a solid pick, she's going to be really reliant on your team being able to provide you with enough damage. So if you pick Ahri, you have a lot of utility, you have a lot of safety, you have potential to have like a really good lane phase, but you need your teammates to pick carry threats. Like Ahri can't be the main carry threat in the next patch. So coming in at number 9, we have Azir. So Azir has pretty much never been a high pick rate champ in solo queue, and I think that's mostly due to his difficulty and slow scaling. He's still seen in competitive here and there, mostly in LPL, and back in the day he had a lot of metas where he was the king of mid, but I'd say right now the biggest problem for Azir is that, or the problem that Azir has always had in solo queue is that he's so slow, right? So it takes him a long time to actually become strong. You usually need to like farm till 2 to 3 items to be able to take the game into your own hands. But in my opinion, with the upcoming changes, I can see his win rate rising. So he's going to have an easier time dealing with tough early games. He'll actually be able to reach his power spikes before the game like explodes, and he's easily going to provide you with enough damage to kill tanky targets. So Azir has always been an extremely strong champion once you reach 2 to 3 items, and if you add that onto the fact that he's a really good Leandri's user, then I think you have a really great power pick in the next patch. Much in the same vein as Azir, we have Viktor in 8th place. So Viktor as a champion functions quite similarly to Azir. However, I think he has much more laning power and he doesn't really take as much to get going. Viktor was already a really powerful pick earlier this season, and he's only really going to get better with these changes. He had a really popular Luden's build that made him more like a burst mage, but you can absolutely build Leandries on him and you can go for more ability haste oriented items, and if you get enough of it, you can rotate like so many cooldowns in a fight. And as we all know, a farmed Viktor is always an issue. So again, it's pretty much the same thing as what I said about Azir, but if you get to reach your items as Viktor, then you're going to be extremely impactful in solo queue games. Coming in at number 7, we have a newer champion, Swain. So Swain just got reworked and he's the ultimate AP bruiser. In my opinion, he was already really strong in solo queue, but now he's only going to get better. So Swain's laning feels really good with his new Q, and it feels really strong to be able to impact both your side lanes with your semi-global W. Swain as a champion actually wants fights to last longer and damage to be lower because he wants to be in the middle of a fight for as long as possible so that he maximizes the value of his ult, since it literally lasts forever now as long as you're draining somebody. He's also a great Leandri's user, but he's special in the fact that he gets to build Demonic Embrace. So Demonic gives you AP based off your bonus HP while also dealing percentage HP damage to the dot. And with every champion getting tankier, he's going to have the tools to deal with them while also benefiting from becoming tankier. So I'm sure a bunch of you will either love or hate this, but we have Yasuo in 6th place. So Yasuo has always been a pretty decent pick in solo queue. I think he could always be good because of his insane synergy with Diana jungle and previously Gragas jungle. Yasuo has only received buffs this season, and in my opinion, the durability changes are also a buff to Yasuo. So being a melee mid laner, he's more likely to be the one taking damage in lane. So if you're mitigating more damage, then in a lot of matchups, you are probably going to outsustain the enemy mid laner's mana pool with your HP pool. And in fact, Yasuo actually had his base health increased in 12.7, so that was 2 patches ago. Um, this change might just tip him over the top. So you add that on top of the fact that he's an auto attack based champion, and his Q is essentially an auto attack with extra range and damage, so this all means that Yasuo has a lot of consistent damage, which is a trend for champions that should be strong next patch. And being tankier and having the damage to deal with tankier targets is pretty much just a recipe for success. So that's why I think Yasuo will become a great pick next patch. Where there's Yasuo, there's Yone. So Yone comes in at 5th because I think he's pretty much the same champion as Yasuo, but with some differences. He's not as reliant on knock-up synergy. He can set up everything himself. He has mixed damage, so he does some true damage, a bit of magic damage. But the big thing in my opinion is that Yone scales much better than Yasuo. However, he had the weaker laning phase, so a Yone that gets to hit his mythic without falling behind is always super strong. Whenever this champ farms well and hits shield bow and IE, he just starts taking over the game. He does so much damage and he has so much range between his E, Q3, and R that he's able to carry a lot of games. I think Yone's biggest weakness was his poor laning phase. He had a rough time in so many matchups, but with the durability changes, he's going to have an easier time scaling up. So Yone is pretty much Yasuo, but more self-sufficient and scales better. I can't overstate his scaling enough. I think a farmed Yone in a side lane and in teamfights is a huge threat. Coming in at 4th, we have Cassiopeia. Cassio's been under the radar in solo queue for a while now, and I think that's mostly because Bersia champs kind of outshine her. With the changes coming in, her core build with Liandry's, Seraph's, Rylai's, it's going to make her really good at dealing consistent damage while also being really tanky. You're never really going to run out of gas in this champion, and you're always going to have some form of damage available. Between Conqueror, Seraphs, and your E passive, you're kind of like an AP bruiser or a sustain mage. And Cass in lane is going to do better when everyone is tankier, as she has access to higher total damage ceiling and does better in extended fights and trades. She's going to be given more time to stack her tier, and she scales really well, so that's always something to look at coming into the next patch. In third place, we have a champion that was already at the top and will remain at the top for now, Veigar. Veigar was a slow champion that was able to flourish in a fast meta because of his insane E utility combined with Predator. I think with the changes coming in, he's just going to get more time to farm more AP stacks. And in longer fights, he's going to get the opportunity to spam his 2-second cooldown W and his E cage over and over and over. I will say that Veigar is probably better at killing squishies than tankier targets. But to be honest, it really doesn't matter if people get tankier if you're just going to give him more time to farm AP and make fights last longer so that he gets to spam his short cooldowns. I think overall, he might actually be stronger in 12.10 than 12.9. Second, Vladimir. Vlad was already quite strong, sitting at a relatively high win rate considering how crazily hard he scales. I would say Vladimir is probably one of the best scaling champs in the game, full stop. His damage ceiling with items is absolutely insane. Something to take note of is that he actually gains AP and damage directly from how much HP he has, which he's getting more of. So Vlad has always been a good scaling champ, but he just struggled to become strong before the game was over sometimes. I think he has a pretty weak level 1 to 9, and to be honest, that was pretty much the only time you were scared as Vlad, in my opinion. I think falling behind or dying in the early game was like the only lose condition for the champ, and now that dying in lane is gonna happen less often, you're gonna be able to reach your huge power spikes as Vlad, and that's why I think this champion will dominate solo queue. The slower a game is, or the longer it takes to end, the more likely this champion will just 1v9 the game. In first place, the current flavor of the month pick, recently reworked, Taliyah. So her rework came out about a week ago, and her win rate in solo queue has been absolutely insane. If you look at any stat site, you'll see that her win rate is through the roof, and in my opinion, that's a crazy thing to see because newer champions should have a lower win rate as people learn how to play them. So the new Taliyah is a lot weaker early game, but she scales into an absolute monster by level 13. And with the changes coming in 12.10, her weak early game isn't going to matter as much, and her powerful mid to late is going to shine a lot more. So right now, she seems to be performing better with a lower CDR Everfrost and Shadowflame kind of build, but we might see her turn into a Liandry's user. I think her new Q synergizes extremely well with ability haste, and you can literally throw boulder Q while your 5Q is going out. So this version of Taliyah wants more worked ground to be created. She wants to throw out as many Qs as possible, which is consistent DPS, something that will become the standard in 12.10. And apart from that, Taliyah just has crazy map presence with her global ult. Her E counters so many champions in the game, and I think she's actually the strongest mid laner currently in 12.9. The only problem is that she really struggles versus certain assassin champions. So she struggles versus Zed, Katarina, Fizz, like these kind of champions. And I mean, guess what? Those champions are going to be weaker next patch. So Taliyah will be absolute S tier in 12.10. So yeah, that's my top 10 for 12.10. I think a lot of these champions are already good, and in theory, they should just become better with the changes that are coming. So if you want to get a head start and play what's going to be good on the next patch, go ahead and play these champs. Anyway, that's it for me. Thanks for watching the video. Feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, whatever. Join the Discord, follow me on Twitch. Appreciate you guys.